when Gavin Newsom talks about California. He's like, I'm very big on California, very bullish on California. Hey, they're all moving. The only reason why they don't move is because it's too difficult to move. It's too expensive to leave versus all the bullshit with all the permits and all that. It's too expensive.
He was supposed to be the future. Gavin Newsom, the man with the movie star looks and the polished rhetoric, was carefully crafted to be the next great leader of the Democratic Party. For years, he was presented as the untouchable governor of the Golden State, a progressive visionary leading a liberal paradise. But that gleaming facade is now cracking under pressure, revealing something far more troubling underneath. The carefully constructed image is being shattered in real time, not by traditional political rivals, but by a perfect storm of public backlash, brutal media takedowns, and the undeniable decay of his own state. The man who dreamed of the White House is now trapped in a political nightmare of his own making, and the whole country is watching him unravel.
I was on KBLA yesterday, with my friend Tavis Smiley. I'm an investor and a supporter of that station. And he said, who do you want for running president? I mentioned, I think you'd be good at the job. Not this year, we know. No, I know. But he said, I don't think he could win. I don't think he could win. He's too progressive coming from this state and what he's done in this state to win in any southern state, any red state. I disagreed, but no, this is a progressive African-American owned station, and I'm sure they like you, but he doesn't think you can win. What do you say to that if you could win look at the swing states, there's only 8 of them.
It all started to publicly ignite with a 1-2 punch from 2 of the most powerful and unpredictable voices in media, a combination so potent it left Newsom reeling. The first blow came from a place he should have felt safe. Bill Maher's show. Maher, a fellow liberal, didn't come at him with partisan rage. Instead, he calmly and precisely exposed one of Newsom's greatest vulnerabilities. He brought up the explosive California law that allows schools to keep a child's gender transition a secret from their own parents. Maher framed it as an issue of pure common sense, something that makes ordinary people think the Democratic Party has lost its mind. Newsom squirmed, trying to defend it as protecting kids from being snitched on, a bizarre choice of words that only made him sound more out of touch. The exchange was devastating because it came from inside his own camp, highlighting a radical policy that felt alienating even to fellow progressives. But if Maher's jab was a clean shot, what came next was a brutal knockout. Joe Rogan, on his massively popular podcast, held nothing back. He labeled Newsom a *sea kinging con man, a cardboard cutout of a person and a stone-cold narrative-driven politician. Rogan's critique was so powerful because it wasn't about a single policy. It was an attack on Newsom's very soul. He argued that unlike other leaders, there's no authentic human being there, just a hollow shell programmed with talking points. In a world craving authenticity, being branded a fake is a political death sentence.
What's going on in California? It isn't slowing down. The gangs are not slowing down. Newsom did eventually come out and apologize. If you want to go on Twitter, Rob, and just go to the apology video that he came out eventually. This is, I think, 4-5 days later. On day 1, I asked him, I said, are you going to come out and do this? Watch how he's finally wanting to have his people be responsible. Go ahead, Rob.
If you incite violence, I want to be clear about this. If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account.
Okay.
That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated. Full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. The founding fathers, they didn't live and die to see this kind of moment. It's time for all of us to stand up. Justice Brandeis, he said it best. In a democracy, the most important office, with all due respect, Mr. President, is not the presidency, and it's certainly not governor. The most important office is office of citizen.
The law that lit this fire was a policy so radical, it felt like a declaration of war on the family itself. Known as AB 665, the bill signed by Newsom fundamentally altered the relationship between parents, children, and the state. It allows minors as young as 12 to consent to mental health treatment, including gender-affirming therapy, without parental permission. More shockingly, it redefines the state's ability to take a child from their parents, lowering the standard to situations where a parent simply doesn't affirm their child's chosen gender identity. In essence, it tells parents that their role is conditional, and that the government can and will step in if they don't comply with a specific ideology. Newsom and his supporters defended it as a necessary measure to protect vulnerable LGBTQ+ youth from potentially unsupportive homes. But for millions of parents, the message was terrifying. It wasn't about protection, it was about control. The idea that a school official or a therapist could make life-altering decisions with a child while keeping their parents completely in the dark felt like a profound betrayal. This single law became the ultimate symbol of government overreach, a policy so extreme it alienated not just conservatives, but moderate Democrats and independents who believed that while schools should teach, parents should raise their children.
I see today the Trump administration, they talked about the fact that California had a rule that schools cannot be required to notify parents if their kids in school have changed their gender, their pronouns. That's the kind of thing, even though it doesn't affect a lot of people, that makes a lot of people go, well, you know what? That's the party without common sense. Now, if that's your state, how are you?
I just disagree with that. I mean, the law was you would be fired. A teacher would be fired if a teacher did not report or snitch on a kid talking about their gender identity. I just think that was wrong. I think teachers should teach. I don't think they should be required to turn in kids. And by the way,
we're talking about their parents. How can you snitch? The idea of a snitch and a parent to me doesn't compute.
Well, I don't. But what is the job of a teacher? It's to teach. If Johnny's talking about some identity issue or some issue about liking someone of the same sex, is the teacher's job.
F-bomb comment. He's an evil snake motherfucker. I don't know how to describe it. You see what he just did there, and Bill got it right. Somehow it's snitching if the parent finds out. If the teacher says, oh, your kid has been going by other names and changing pronouns and dressing up this way, you don't know about that as the parents. That's the snitch. It's the parent's job to raise the child.
Rogan's con man label resonated so deeply because it tapped into a well of public suspicion that had been building for years, a suspicion crystallized by one infamous dinner. The French Laundry incident became a permanent stain on Newsom's record, the perfect encapsulation of his hypocrisy. At the height of the pandemic, while he was imposing some of the strictest lockdown orders in the nation, shutting down schools, closing small businesses, and demanding Californians sacrifice for the greater good, he was caught. Photos emerged showing him dining indoors, maskless, at one of the most exclusive and expensive restaurants in the world, shoulder to shoulder with a crowd of lobbyists. The arrogance was breathtaking. He wasn't just breaking his own rules, he was flaunting his exemption from them. This wasn't an isolated lapse in judgment, it was part of a pattern. While public school students were forced into remote learning, Newsom's own children were attending in-person classes at a private academy. He preached sacrifice from a position of immense privilege, demonstrating a fundamental disconnect from the struggles of the very people he governed. The French Laundry dinner wasn't just about a meal, it was a symbolic moment that proved to many that Newsom was exactly what Rogan called him, a politician who lives by one set of rules for the elite, and another for everyone else.
I was on KBLA yesterday, with my friend Tavis Smiley. I'm an investor and a supporter of that station. And he said, who do you want for running president? I mentioned, I think you'd be good at the job. Not this year, we know. No, I know. But he said, I don't think he could win. I don't think he could win. He's too progressive coming from this state and what he's done in this state to win in any southern state, any red state. I disagreed, but no, this is a progressive African-American owned station, and I'm sure they like you, but he doesn't think you can win. What do you say to that if you could win look at the swing state, there's only 8.
While Newsom was busy managing his public image and navigating his own scandals, the economic engine of his state was sputtering and dying. The California dream, once synonymous with innovation and prosperity, was turning into a bureaucratic nightmare. The state's most iconic and powerful corporations, the very engines of its economy, began a mass exodus. Tesla, the global face of electric vehicle innovation, packed up its headquarters and moved to Texas, with CEO Elon Musk citing California's stifling regulations and hostile business climate. He wasn't alone. Tech giant Oracle followed suit, as did Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Two foundational pillars of Silicon Valley, Charles Schwab, a financial behemoth, also fled for Texas. The list goes on. These weren't small businesses, these were corporate titans voting with their feet, sending a clear message that California was no longer a viable place to grow. For every headline-grabbing departure, thousands of smaller businesses either collapsed under the weight of taxes and red tape or quietly relocated to states like Florida, Arizona, and Nevada. It was a slow, steady bleed of capital, talent, and opportunity, a direct consequence of policies that punished success and rewarded dependency. The state that once represented limitless possibility was now known for its U-Haul shortages, as more people packed up to leave than to arrive.
Nobody wants President Newsom either. Nobody believes in that guy. That guy's a con man. Everything he did in California, from trying to mandate vaccines for kids, to being caught public without a mask and lying about the fact that he was outdoors.
Yeah.
Nobody believes in that guy. He's just a politician, just a stone cold, narrative driven politician. Nobody thinks he's a real human. Whether you like Trump or not, whether you think he's corrupt or not, that's a human being. You know what that guy is. Same thing with RFK Jr. Whether you believe that he's correct about vaccines or whether you believe his policies would be effective, and you know that's a human being. With Newsom, you got like this construct, this cardboard cutout of a person. I don't think people want that, but they might want it more than they want President Trump.
As the economy faltered, the physical landscape of California's cities began to reflect the internal decay. The Golden State's most celebrated urban centers, like San Francisco and Los Angeles, devolved into cautionary tales of failed leadership. The problem of homelessness, once a contained issue, exploded into a full-blown humanitarian crisis. Sprawling encampments took over entire neighborhoods, with sidewalks, public parks, and highway underpasses becoming permanent residences for thousands. This wasn't just a housing problem. It was a public health and safety disaster. Open drug use became rampant, and streets were littered with discarded needles and human waste. The situation became so dire that some parts of San Francisco were compared to third-world slums. Smash-and-grab robberies became a daily occurrence, fueled by policies like Proposition 47, which Newsom supported, that downgraded theft of under $950 to a misdemeanor, effectively decriminalizing shoplifting. The most damning indictment of his leadership came with the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping. In the days leading up to the summit, the city of San Francisco, which had claimed for years it was powerless to solve the homeless crisis, miraculously cleared the encampments and power-washed the streets. Newsom shamelessly admitted they cleaned up because fancy leaders were coming to town. It was a Potemkin village on a grand scale, a disgusting admission that the well-being of his own citizens was less important than creating a temporary sanitized facade for a foreign dictator.
When Gavin Newsom talks about California, he's like, I'm very big on California, very bullish on California. Hey, they're all moving. The only reason why they don't move is because it's too difficult to move. It's too expensive to leave versus all the bullshit with all the permits and all that. It's too expensive. It's like what Gavin Newsom did when Xi Jinping came to San Francisco.
He cleaned it up.
He cleaned it up.
And then it became a pigsty.
Well, the dumbest thing is he said,
Folks say, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true because it's true.
like, how about just keep your house clean?
Can you imagine? The day he left, it went right back. What a disgrace.
The consequences of this systemic failure weren't just economic or aesthetic. They were deeply personal and at times tragic. The story of actor Mel Gibson, a longtime California resident, put a human face on the government's incompetence. When devastating wildfires tore through the state, Gibson's multi-million-dollar Malibu home was wiped out. He didn't chalk it up to a natural disaster. Instead, he publicly blasted the state's leadership for years of catastrophic forest mismanagement. He, along with countless fire experts, argued that the state's environmental policies had prevented controlled burns and proper clearing of flammable brush, creating a tinderbox waiting to explode. His anger resonated with thousands of Californians who had lost their homes, their businesses, and their sense of security to fires that felt entirely preventable. This wasn't an isolated issue. The state was also lurching through a severe water crisis. Yet Newsom's administration was criticized for failing to invest in new reservoirs and water storage infrastructure, often prioritizing ideological environmental goals over the practical needs of farmers and residents. From fire to water, a clear pattern emerged, a government so caught up in its own progressive narrative that it failed to perform its most basic duties of protecting its people and resources.
Newsom and Karen Bass have already proven their incompetence and poor leadership during the Los Angeles wildfires. Now, as we experience rampant lawlessness and civil unrest, it's never been more clear they're unable to respond effectively and responsibly during calamity. Whether it's sheer incompetence or outright malevolence, the reality is stark. California's in a state of turmoil, and I ask my fellow Angelenos, why are Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass still in office? How much more of their destructive decision-making masquerading as leadership are we going to tolerate?
California Governor Gavin Newsom is now calling his city's homeless encampments unacceptable, which is odd since he's the guy who, made them acceptable, turning sidewalks into red carpet events for drug addicts, thieves, and unemployed CNN anchors. On Monday, he urged cities to ban the camps from sidewalks, parks, and other public areas. So after years of denying the problem, he's now pretending to fix it, which is like putting on a condom as you're leaving a whorehouse.
As criticism mounted from all sides, Newsom's political survival instincts kicked in, and he began to shapeshift. The man who had built his career on being a defiant progressive warrior suddenly started talking like a moderate. He was a political chameleon, changing his colors to match the shifting political winds. For years, he had positioned himself as a foil to Donald Trump, grandstanding about California being a sanctuary state and daring federal ICE agents to come arrest him. He marched with open borders activists and championed policies that protected undocumented immigrants. But as the border crisis worsened and public opinion soured, he abruptly flipped the script. He started sending the California National Guard to the border to combat drug smuggling and began using tougher rhetoric on illegal immigration. The same pattern appeared on crime. After years of supporting progressive reforms that led to rising crime rates, he suddenly pivoted to a tough-on-crime stance, proposing new laws to crack down on retail theft and property crimes. It was a dizzying display of political opportunism, reinforcing Rogan's assessment that he was a man with no core principles, only a relentless drive for power. He was a political weather vane, spinning wildly with every gust of public opinion, hoping to find a direction that would save his sinking career. Perhaps the most alarming sign for Newsom is that the backlash is no longer just coming from conservatives or media personalities. It's coming from within his own base. The very progressives who once cheered him as California's golden child are now quietly grumbling. On a progressive African-American-owned radio station, the host Tavis Smiley told Bill Maher that Newsom couldn't win a national election because he was too progressive and too tied to the failures of his state. This sentiment is spreading. Moderate Democrats and independents, who once saw him as a pragmatic leader, now see him as a captive of his party's most extreme wing. The failed recall effort against him in 2021, while ultimately unsuccessful, was a massive warning sign. It revealed a deep and widespread dissatisfaction with his leadership that crossed party lines. People were tired of the lockdowns, the hypocrisy, the rising cost of living, and the sense that the state was spiraling out of control. The enthusiasm that once surrounded him has evaporated, replaced by a quiet, simmering resentment. His donor base is getting nervous, and his political allies are no longer rushing to his defense. The foundation of his support is cracking, and once that happens, the entire structure is in danger of collapse. Now caught in this political firestorm, Newsom is making a last-ditch, desperate scramble to salvage his image, clearly with an eye on the national stage. His recent flurry of activity, the staged photo ops at cleanup sites, the sudden policy reversals on crime and the border, is not the action of a confident leader. It is the panicked damage control of a politician who sees his ambitions slipping away. He is trying to present a reformed, more moderate version of himself to the American public, hoping they won't look too closely at the chaos he's leaving behind in California. But it's likely too little, too late. People can smell desperation, and they know the difference between genuine leadership and a cynical political performance. California was meant to be his showcase, a shining example of progressive governance. Instead, it has become a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when ideology trumps practicality. If this brand of chaos, hypocrisy, and last-minute spin is what he offers, then America has to ask itself a serious question. If this is what Gavin Newsom did to the Golden State, what would he do to the rest of the country? The answer is a political nightmare that no one can afford.